about problem solving. And one of the frameworks that I've used very effectively in the past is design thinking. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about design thinking and why design thinking is an effective method. To give you a quick introduction of design thinking, it's not a new concept. It's in fact been around since the 1950s and the 1960s, when people wanted to use a scientific method of solving a particular problem. And they've even found it effective then. But it wasn't very popular then. It started becoming popular after Tim Brown, who's the CEO of the design company called IDEO, wrote an article about design thinking. So what is design thinking really? Design thinking is a framework of solving problems, and there are 5 phases in this framework. The first phase is empathize, and this is a very important phase. Empathize because we need to truly understand the problem that the people are facing and even feel what they are feeling. Unless we truly empathize with them, we'll not be able to give it sufficient importance. So empathize. And then the second phase is define. Here we define the problem. We try to understand what the problem is and we clearly articulate the problem. There are times when we try to get into solutioning a little bit too quick. So there's a complete phase dedicated to just understanding and articulating the problem. And this definition of the problem phase, it's very important that we have the involvement of the people who are actually facing the problem. So the first time I encountered design thinking was a design thinking workshop when I was working with Invesco, which was my previous company. It's a financial services company. At that point in time, Invesco did not really have a presence in India. And it was later when they merged with or acquired Religare and then so on. But the problem that we were trying to solve was turnaround times for the infrastructure services team, for example. And there were a couple of problems that we were trying to solve, but the one that I particularly remember was the turnaround times for the infrastructure services team. And I was not a part of the infrastructure services team then. I had absolutely no clue what infrastructure services are really. I had never really seen the inside of a data center back then. But I was representing the customer in that workshop. So it was a design thinking workshop where I was the voice of customer, right? And interestingly, they had mixed design thinking along with lean processes, right? They were trying to identify activities which were really not value adding and still taking time. So long story short, I was the voice of customer. So good design thinking workshops will always include people who are facing the problem, the customer, the user, etc. And then we have the third phase, which is ideate. And this is the most interesting and most fascinating stage in the entire design thinking workshop because you go crazy in this phase. No ideas are bad ideas. Every single idea, no matter how wacky or crazy it might sound, is a good idea, is what we think in the beginning. Of course, we are going to shortlist the ideas and we're going to try to find all the problems and the challenges in each of those ideas and all that. But when we are ideating, when we are in the first stage of the ideation, and by the way, there are 2 stages within the ideation phase. The first phase is just come up with wacky and crazy ideas, all kinds of ideas, right? Anything that comes to mind. You break the room down into 4 different teams, and then everyone is given charts and post-it notes. Now, post-it notes are given with a very specific reason. Okay, it's very, very intentional. Post-it notes are supposed to be small. So the fact that they are small means that you will have to articulate your ideas into a small post-it note. Because if you're not being able to articulate the idea in a small post-it note, it potentially means that you're trying to explain too much, which has the risk of you trying to get into solutioning already. So don't try to justify your idea or explain your idea or try to put a solution around it. Just, write down your idea on a small post-it note and, stick it on the chart. So everybody first writes down their ideas, no matter how crazy or wacky they are, it's okay. Because at this point in time, we're not judging each other based on whether it makes sense or not. We're just writing all the ideas down and then sticking onto the chart. And then once that phase is over, and this is all time boxed, right? Once those 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever is over, everybody is given, 5 minutes or so to explain their ideas, right? And then everybody within the team puts stars or dots or whatever, depending upon how much they like the idea or not, on the idea, right? On the post-it note. So, higher star or higher dot ideas are chosen for explanations later and so on. So it's a shortlisting method. And then the entire chart is passed around within the 4 teams. And then everybody looks at the ideas and puts their stars and dots, etc., etc. And then shortlisting is done. And then everybody tries to explain their idea and why it should be chosen. And then everybody challenges that idea and so on and so forth. And then we choose a small set of ideas. So that is the ideation process. The third phase of design thinking workshop is the prototyping phase. So once you've shortlisted all the ideas, you start prototyping. And prototyping doesn't mean real prototyping, but it means that within the classroom or within the workshop, the small set of chosen ideas are taken and then every team builds their own prototype. Either you have one idea per team and then everybody prototypes it on paper as to how they are going to implement that idea, visually, and everybody tries to look at the different challenges and constraints that they are going to have to adhere to. And then based on that, a prototyping is done. There itself, it's possible that some of the ideas might get cancelled, because when you're building the prototype, you get to see so many problems that your idea might have, right? And then finally, one idea or 2 ideas are chosen and then they are implemented. In all probability, only one idea is chosen depending upon what it is that you're trying to do. And then you implement and test it. So that is design thinking, and it is usually done in a workshop. Now, there are many, many benefits of design thinking. The most interesting benefit is that there is creativity. Creativity is completely unleashed because there's a group of people that sit around in a workshop and do nothing but try to come up with innovative ideas about how we can fix the problem. And it could be something as simple as turnaround times for our infrastructure services team, improving turnaround times. Or it could be something more complex, like changing the culture of an organization so that everybody becomes innovative. And these are the 2 ideation workshops or design thinking workshops that I was a part of. The first one was the turnaround times of infrastructure services team. The second one was I had joined the strategy and innovation team, and this is also in my previous organization, and we were brainstorming as to why the organization is not so innovative. And there were so many reasons that people gave, and then they said, okay, let's have a proper design thinking workshop as to how we can change the culture of the organization so that innovation is encouraged and people become more courageous when it comes to coming up with innovative ideas or implementations or what have you. So that was another very, very interesting ideation workshop that happened in Houston. I had to travel to Houston for that workshop, and there was a considerable amount of investment that the organization had done to run that design thinking workshop, right? So creativity is completely unleashed, right? You're sitting there, you're doing nothing else but just coming up with ideas, and there is no taboo, there's no nobody's judging you for coming up with wacky ideas. You are in fact encouraged to come up with the wackiest, craziest ideas that you can. Ultimately, of course, they'll be shot down. But what happens is when you're doing this, right, some ideas, well, sometimes out of those crazy ideas, some of these actually make sense. Like there's a classic example that, people give when it comes to design thinking workshops, that there's this restaurant and they had chefs and all. And the chefs' morals were going down because they had to cook the same food every day, and people were getting bored and their general morale was going down. And so during the design thinking workshop, someone came up with the idea that let's change the uniforms that the chefs are wearing, and it was like a professional chef uniform, which basically imbibed pride in each of the workers, which improved team morale. Of course, it wasn't the only solution, and it was a part of a suite of solutions. But my point is, sometimes you do find some very, very interesting ideas within the crazy idea mix that makes sense. But more often what happens is, among these crazy ideas, or rather out of these crazy ideas, you will find a subsidiary idea or an idea that is related to that particular crazy idea or a part of that idea which makes sense. So everything might not make sense, but it definitely adds value. So creativity is completely unleashed. That is one of the biggest benefits of design thinking. Another big benefit of design thinking is that collaboration improves quite a bit, because there's a group of people who are sitting in the room and they're talking and they're chatting, and suddenly all the inhibitions are removed because you are encouraged to come up with the craziest idea. So everybody now starts talking, and it's a very fun activity because everybody's laughing and everybody's having fun. So suddenly collaboration improves. And this is, I'm not talking about just the design thinking workshop. People who are engaged in this workshop will continue to collaborate after the workshop as well, because now they are sort of in friendlier terms, if you know what I mean. So collaboration improves, and everybody's point of view is heard, right? Considering that the definition phase of design thinking also includes the voice of customer or the users or the user of the end solution, right? They get heard, and this improves the user satisfaction, because they, first of all, they feel that they were able to voice their concern, and that somebody was listening. But more importantly, the solution is designed around the problem which was defined by the customer or be defined by the end user. So there is much greater end user satisfaction when you're doing design thinking workshops. And finally, competitive advantage. It is statistically now known that organizations that are using design thinking as a method of problem solving are more innovative, are more creative, are more cutting edge, and that is why I have much better competitive advantage. So there are many, many benefits of design thinking as a problem solving framework, but it's not without its challenges, right? It's not very easy to do design thinking workshops, simply because, first of all, it is resource intensive. It is a little expensive. We'll have to, in all probability, get a consultant who can run the workshop for you. Second of all the people who are going to be engaged in the design thinking workshop need to be there physically in a room, in all probability. Now, I've heard some people also do virtual design thinking workshops, but it's really, really very effective if you're all in the same room, right? And if you're all talking, and if you're all, and there are charts and there are post-it notes, and it's a fun activity that needs to be a fun activity to be effective. So it's a little bit expensive, especially if you're a global team and if you're spread across the world and everybody needs to get into. So there is a travel and there is amount of time spent and all of that. So it gets a little expensive. Other than that, the people who are engaged in the workshop also need to be diverse from the kind of work that they do, whether it's gender, race, their background, their ethnicity, or the kind of work that they do, their educational qualification, etc., etc. All these things need to be diverse. It is effective only when the people who are engaged in the workshop are diverse and bring in fresh ideas, because of their diversity in experience or diversity in upbringing or diversity in what have you, nationality or what have you. It becomes more effective because all kinds of ideas start coming in. And that's the whole point of design thinking. And that's why sometimes that becomes a challenge, because if you're not a diverse team, right, if the same people who are usually making decisions about solving problems are engaged in the design thinking workshop, there will be no different outcome, right? They'll make the same decisions. They'll agree to each other, and things will just get done the same way that they are done without a design thinking workshop. So it's very important that the people who are engaged in the design thinking activity need to be diverse. So there are some challenges with the design thinking workshop as well, but if we overcome these challenges, right, if we keep an open mind, if we are willing to spend some amount of time and money and resources and engage everyone into the workshop and go in with an open heart, then it is a fantastic way of solving problems. And I think design thinking is not used enough in the industry today. It's a beautiful way of solving problems and improves collaboration, improves friendship. In my 23-24 years of experience in the industry, I have realized one thing, that problems don't get solved with technology or with innovative people or with whatever. Problems get solved through collaboration. If you are friends with the people that you work with, if you enjoy the work that you're doing, then things get done much better, much faster, much more efficiently, much more effectively. And people who enjoy their work most grow the best in their career, is what I've seen throughout my life. So that's my episode. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. If you did, then please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with colleagues and friends and people who might be interested in this kind of content. Let me know if you would like me to cover some topic. I'll be glad to. Once more, I would like to remind you that Enterprise Architecture Radio is less a podcast and more a collaboration platform. I have created this podcast with the intent to bring the enterprise architecture community and not just enterprise architecture, anybody in the IT field or in the business of technology and so on. They all get together and start talking to each other and start learning from each other and start guiding each other and start conversations that are fun and interesting. And that's the whole point of Enterprise Architecture Radio. So I hope you are enjoying this podcast, and I hope that you have fun.